Uh, so this is a presentation on the Bar Kokhba revolt by me, Jacob Jaffe. The Bar Kokhba revolt occurred in the years 132 to 136 in the Common Era. It was actually the third of the Jewish-Roman wars, there being a total of three. The first Jewish-Roman war happened from 67 to 73 Common Era, which started with anti-taxation protests leading to a full rebellion. Jerusalem is put to the torch, the Second Temple is destroyed, and the rebellion officially ends with the fall of the fortress of Masada in the year 73. The Second Jewish-Roman War is the Kaitos War, also called the Rebellion of the Exile, because it really happened when a bunch of diasporic Jews revolted in various provinces of Rome. All the way between Cyprus and Mesopotamia, they fought a lot of guerrilla action, and it ends in the year 117. It also directly leads to Hadrian being crowned the next emperor of Rome, and he chooses to consolidate the eastern frontier and to concentrate on Judea and Jerusalem as sort of hotspots of trouble for the empire. And this will be important for the cause of the Third Jewish-Roman War. So Hadrian actually visits the remains of the Second Temple destroyed in the First Jewish-Roman War, and his visit is initially heralded as a positive, but there are rumors swirling that he plans the construction of a Roman temple, and they're actually fairly clearly true, that he's planning to build a temple to Jupiter on the same grounds, which is obviously very offensive to the Jews living in Judea. He also plans the construction of a city on the grounds where Jerusalem once stood, called Aelia Capitolina, excuse my pronunciation there, which also is part of the sin called plowing up the temple, which is showing insufficient respect to the grounds where the First and Second Temples once stood. And so there's also some amount of evidence that Hadrian was planning a ban on circumcision, which also would have been offensive to the Jews living in Judea, but evidence is somewhat sketchy on those grounds. He also garrisons a legion in Jerusalem called Legio Ex Fretensis, which inflames tensions even further. All right, so the early revolt is led by a man named Simon ben Kokhba, and they learn from the lessons of the First and Second Rebellion and plan very carefully. It starts in a town called Modi'in, which is currently in the West Bank, and they cut off the Roman garrison in Jerusalem from reinforcements and supplies, leading to actually a fairly decisive, quick victory for the Jewish rebels. They're essentially victorious, and they use these systems of caves that you can see in the map on the right. Okay, also during the rebellion, Christians are persecuted because they're viewed as Roman collaborators for refusing to help the Jewish side of the war. So this ushers in what's called the era of the redemption of Israel, where there's a Jewish-controlled Judea for nearly 2.5 years, essentially. So Simon ben Kokhba, previously mentioned, takes the title of Nasi Israel, or Prince of Israel. And it's essentially its own country at this point. It has its own functioning government, its own functioning bureaucracy, and it's minting its own currency, as you can see. Okay, so the millennial aspect for this is Ben Kokhba becomes Bar Kokhba, which is direct reference to the star prophecy of Numbers, chapter 24, verse 17. Bar Kokhba means son of a star, which referenced the prophecy just mentioned, which actually says, "There shall come a star out of Jacob," which in the Jewish tradition, the Messiah is to come out of the Davidic line, and the Jacobean line is sort of where the Davidic line can be interpreted to have come from. So this gives him sort of claim to the title of Messiah. And he claims the title of Jewish Messiah, and therefore the Redeemer of Israel, which is how the era gets the name Era of the Redemption of Israel. And so obviously the Romans are not going to let the Jews in Judea win on a larger scale, so Hadrian recalls his top general named Julius Severus from Britain, and he basically gathers a massive army on his way there, which leads to 3 years of extremely bloody fighting in Judea for control of the province. and eventually overwhelming numbers, and overwhelming scale, really, of the Roman army becomes too much for the Judean rebels, and the final siege occurs at the Judean headquarters of Betar. And in Jewish tradition, it's said that Betar falls on the date of Tisha B'Av, which is the holiday that commemorates the fall of the first and second temples. And at least 500,000 Jews and 2 Roman legions were destroyed outright. It's probable that there was also more damage inflicted to additional Roman legions. It's also said that the Emperor Hadrian forewent his typical greeting to the Senate of, "If you and your children are in health, it is well, I and the army are in health," because he and the army at the time were not really in health. Okay, so the Bar Kokhba revolt has a very strong legacy, both now and then. So the Emperor Hadrian attempts to destroy Judaism as the source of all these revolts, which was a previous idea of his that is essentially confirmed by this third rebellion. He prohibits the Torah and the Hebrew calendar. The Hebrew calendar is important because without the Hebrew calendar, it's impossible to know actually when to celebrate each of the holidays, making practicing the actual religion very difficult. Ordained rabbis are systematically killed, and in the long term, Jews are barred from Jerusalem. And to destroy any memory of the Jews in Judea, Hadrian renames Jerusalem officially to Aelis Capitolina, and he renames Judea as well, to destroy any memory of the people in the place that was once there. This is also what's considered the final diaspora of Jews from Judea. And so the legacy of this in the millennial aspect is that in Jewish tradition, Messianism becomes abstracted. It's no longer considered immediate because of the negative memories and consequences associated with the Bar Kokhba revolt. The failed Messianism is associated with bad news, and Judaism, as a result, becomes extremely cautious and conservative in its predictions. Also, his Bar Kokhba is referred to in the Talmud, the repository of Jewish wisdom, as son of lies. And if you're called out in such a holy text as being a false Messiah and a false prophet and the son of lies, it generally means that a religion's opinion of you has soured greatly. The more modern legacy of the Bar Kokhba revolt, however, is a little more complicated. So in early Israel, there weren't a lot of sources of nationalist pride to be had. So some Israelis seized on the tale of Simon Bar Kokhba to really get a sense of that nationalist pride. And so there's a Zionist youth movement called Betar, and there's a line that is said in the Israeli equivalent of elementary schools. This line of a song that goes, "Bar Kokhba was a hero, he fought for liberty," which is very different from the initial reaction to the Bar Kokhba revolt. However, this Jewish nationalism has sort of also been a source of controversy. A former head of Jewish intelligence once said that Bar Kokhba was an irresponsible adventurer who brought disaster on the Jewish people and made a direct connection to Israel's current situation with Palestine, and that both of these things are perpetrated by people who think they're doing what's best for Israel and they're getting Israel freedom, but it's really inviting disaster. And that is the presentation. Thank you very much.